Businesses and governments rely on high quality data to produce reliable models and insights. Those who figured out how to collect and use data are outperforming their competitors. So when valuable data is stolen or compromised, the damage can be significant. But securing these digital crown jewels isn't just their concern. We all have a lot at stake when it comes to data privacy. Today on Shak, we have Karmena McArthur, who has been helping companies to build out their information security and data privacy programs and improve their overall security posture for over 9 years. She has a vast amount of experience across the different areas of information security, ranging from technical to strategic security management. Karmena is currently the Chief Information Security Officer at IslandNet and has been appointed as a member of the advisory board at the University of Technology, Jamaica for the Computer Network and Security Degree Program. Welcome, Karmena, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Akila.
So, there was a time when people put locks on filing cabinets and rented safety deposit boxes, but as more of our data becomes digitized and we share more information online, we have to consider new ways of protecting our data.
Most definitely.
So tell me about your role as Chief Information Security Officer.
Okay, so as a Chief Information Security Officer, I'm responsible for the development of company's overall cybersecurity strategy and the maintenance of their security management program. So through this program comes the development of the security policies and procedures which govern how organization will secure its systems and what will be done to achieve compliance with the different policies. So I'm also responsible for providing guidance to the security teams and ensure a smooth running of the security operations center. And of course, mentorship and training of the security team is also another area that I'm passionate about, and also creating awareness of the relevant security policies to all the relevant staff members.
This all seems like interesting work to me, being a Chief Information Security Officer, but I was curious if are there a lot of women in your field? I was just curious.
No.
Okay.
No, and I'm figuring you probably wondering how did I end up in this?
Yes, a little bit.
Right. So I mean, I can even tell from when I was back in university that I was in a year group. My degree was in IT, and in my year group, we had a total of 150 persons, and only 30 of them were female, right? And then throughout university, I got introduced to computer security. I did an elective course. And then, somewhere along the line, graduating from university and, landed my first job, that somehow, the opportunity just came up and they're like, we see that you have an interest in cybersecurity. Here's an opportunity.
Well.
Just like that, And so then I'm like, you know what? I'll take up this challenge. I'll do this.
Okay.
So I ended up in cybersecurity and invested a lot in it. But I'd say I am not aware of any other Chief Information Security Officer that's a female. They might be out there somewhere around the globe. But there's really not a lot. And I would say, I think it's a very good role for women to consider.
Okay.
Getting into.
Yes, and it's very interesting, and I suppose it's a growing kind of area and something that's becoming more and more important anyway. So
yes, growing, and there is a growing demand for it. There's more demand right now than the positions that can be filled by anyone in cybersecurity. So it's really a good area to venture into.
Yes. Okay, cool. So, companies' responsibility, I would say, is twofold. It's to protect its own data and systems, which can represent a competitive advantage, and also to protect the data of its customers.
Exactly.
So I know like there are, particular industries, maybe like medical institutions, banks, they have a treasure trove of information that if exposed could be catastrophic.
Yeah.
Within the region, there's legislation now that requires very specific management and protection of this data. But can the average small business IT professional manage this in-house? Just want to know what your thoughts are.
Okay, so as it relates to small and medium-sized businesses,
Mm-hmm.
challenges in the IT department will vary clearly from business to business.
Right.
Some IT teams would be able to handle the technical requirements that would make the business compliant, while others might have to, seek additional resources, whether through
Mm-hmm.
outsourcing or hiring persons internally to assist with that. But just to quickly point out as well that compliance with these legislations generally require more than just technical solutions.
Mm-hmm.
It might require new processes along with a proper risk management program, which is usually handled outside of the IT department.
Okay.
So various departments within a business will definitely need to work together to achieve an overall compliance with legislations.
Okay. So, I mean, as you said, small and medium-sized businesses, in order to, I guess, to enhance their cybersecurity profile, may in fact have to outsource some of these things because they
Right.
seem pretty complex.
Yeah. Especially if they don't have the expertise in-house, then they will definitely want to reach out to persons who, understand the legislation more and will be able to guide them as well.
Mm-hmm. So, as you mentioned, you're the chief information security officer, but I noticed that, in some of the legislation, it requires a data privacy officer. So, and you did mention that some of the expertise is outside of IT. So, I'm just wondering if that role is maybe a technical role or a administrative role. I'm just kind of curious.
Okay, so based on my understanding of that, that role is generally an administrative role.
Okay, okay.
Right. So persons within these roles are responsible for helping organizations to achieve and maintain compliance with the
Mhm.
relevant legislation, right?
Okay,
So
got it.
this individual will also need to understand the legal requirements. However, it does help if the individual within this role has a strong background or understanding of technology,
Okay.
and then it might be easier for a technical person to move into an administration role, but usually it can be a challenge to train an administrative oriented
Mm-hmm,
person
mm-hmm.
to learn the technical aspects. So it's really, finding somebody that can,
Yeah.
it's like the best of both worlds, really.
Yeah, like a good blend. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, clearly in this part of the world, we are kind of catching up in terms of seeking to protect customer data. So just wondering if you think that there is sufficient policy and legislation to protect this data, or maybe do we need to go further, or just wondering what your thoughts were.
Okay, so as it relates, I think as a Caribbean region that we need to, we definitely need to do some more work in this area.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There are countries across the Caribbean, they are currently working to either adopt or strengthen their data protection legislation.
Mm-hmm.
Also, as a region, we need to review, how we transfer data across borders and how we can align our data protection legislations with ones in different regions, such
Okay.
as the European Union,
Mm-hmm.
that published their general data protection regulation back in 2018.
Yes,
And
GDPR. Yep.
then,
Mm-hmm.
right, and then this regulation globally required entities, storing personal information about their EU citizens to be in compliance with this regulation as well.
Okay.
So we will need to ensure that personal data is being protected within and without our borders.
Borders. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, what do you think are, we talk about protection of data, what do you think are the biggest security threats to companies in general and maybe some common weaknesses in their IT strategy?
Okay, so An organization's security is only as strong as its weakest link, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yes.
appears, yeah, and it appears in different forms. So, in terms of biggest threats, the first one I'll pick is not educating your staff members, on the do's and
Mm-hmm.
don'ts of cybersecurity.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, this can definitely open doors for different kinds of security attacks if, persons are not properly educated on the risk associated with those types of activities.
Yeah.
Right. And then there is also insider abuse, which is really carried out by disgruntled employees.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Employees usually have more access or access privileges to company systems and data and facilities. So there's nothing like an unhappy employee
True.
destroying
True.
critical assets that could, cripple the business.
Yes.
So this in itself is a huge threat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there is phishing attacks, it's very popular. You know, um, all you need is just one employee to click
To
a link in
click
an
on something.
email,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then there is this major cyber attack going on in your environment, and you're like, what is happening?
Yes.
You
Yes.
know? So, and then there, apart from the phishing attacks, you have malware and you have ransomware, people holding your data at ransom,
Mm-hmm.
for money.
For fee. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And that's been happening a lot lately.
Okay.
Most times malwares enter a company through an employee clicking a link or downloading a malicious software from the internet that looks safe.
Mm-hmm. Looks legitimate, but isn't.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. And then um, having unsecure computer systems, within your company, that means you may have machines without antivirus software or it has an outdated software or weak passwords,
Mm-hmm.
that's a that's a
Yeah.
common one, you know. And as explained earlier, this can make hackers' life easy.
Yeah.
They can exploit vulnerabilities or even guess a weak password, and then the rest is history. What happens after that?
Okay. So, I mean, you mentioned hacking. We've all seen the movies. The goth tech genius who can hack encryption in minutes and steal my identity, kind of thing. So maybe you could tell us a bit more about hacking. How easy is it to be hacked? Really, I know you mentioned that malware and that kind of thing, but just trying to figure out what is it and how easy is it for me to be hacked or for anyone to be hacked, really.
Okay, so I mean, just to define it a bit, so hacking in the IT world is really an attempt to gain access to a computer system where there is no authorization for access given,
Mm-hmm.
and it's usually for some illicit purpose.
Right. Right. Okay.
So hacking can actually be quite easy depending on the system being targeted.
Okay.
So if the target system doesn't have implemented security controls, then an attacker could easily gain access to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's connected to the internet. The goal is to implement different layers of security to make it very difficult for a hacker to gain access, right? So
Yeah.
strong, complex passwords, along with system software keeping up to date, installing and properly configuring maybe a firewall, you know,
Okay.
antivirus software. Those are different layers that,
Mm-hmm.
can make things a lot more difficult for a hacker to get into your system. So it's always good to have different security controls or systems on your computer. So hackers will constantly look for ways to get into the computer system. And this is why it's important to protect ourselves while online. Always be on the lookout for suspicious behaviors.
Okay. So, I mean, as you know, we've seen a shift in the way, people work due to the COVID pandemic, and
Yes.
but it has exposed some companies who lag far behind in the digitization of their business, but also, brought into prominence concerns about cybersecurity. So I'm wondering, like, with the whole work from home conditions imposed during COVID-19 and the fact that, data centers and offices are relatively empty and non-manned, if we've seen a have we seen an increase or a related increase in cyber attacks?
So yes, we've seen increase in COVID, theme related attacks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, according to I was reading some article, the FinTech News Group, and coronavirus is being blamed for
Everything.
200, yeah, everything. But in terms of statistics, they're saying a 238% rise in attacks. It's
Whoa.
particularly on banks.
Yes,
You
yes.
know,
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge thing there. So there's also been a significant increase in, phishing emails that we talked about before,
Yes.
which is really a type of online scam where criminals impersonate legitimate organizations in order to steal some kind of sensitive information. And then,
Mm.
there's the popular ransomware.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so there has been a number of phishing attacks, including ones purporting to be from like the Centers for Disease Control and
Control. Okay.
Prevention, and
Okay.
others related to like unemployment insurance and even subjects on vaccines and stock markets and staycations and
Oh,
even
oh
food
Lord.
delivery. They're becoming
They're
very
real
creative.
creative.
Yeah, so the attackers definitely using these topics to exploit persons' weaknesses, in order, in this
Wow.
difficult time. And so
Yes.
all persons really need to remain vigilant when it comes on to handling unsolicited emails in your mailbox.
I have to say, Carmine, I'm feeling a bit nervous now.
Don't be, don't be.
So, as I mentioned, data is not only precious to companies but individuals.
Yes,
Like I'm a big fan of smart devices, Alexa, Google, connected lights, all that kind of thing. But
yes.
like in the back of my mind, I always wonder, if these devices are a bit too smart. So while they're really useful, I'm just curious, do they represent a significant threat to my data?
They do. They can. All right. So what you have is, there is a rapid development of new technology, right? Many
Mm-hmm.
times cybersecurity is an afterthought, because things are just rapidly developing and then they're like, oh, okay, now we need to think about cybersecurity. And
Yeah.
then what you have also, without companies, as in the companies, the manufacturing companies properly educating the users of these
Mm-hmm.
devices how to securely utilize them, then this opens up doors for possible attacks that can affect the individual in many ways.
Yeah.
We've heard of incidents where home camera systems, with access to the internet, have been hacked due to devices were using weak or unsecured passwords.
Yeah.
And then back in 2019, researchers found that Google Home and Alexa, could be used to obtain passwords and overhear conversations from unsuspecting users. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the first time I heard that, I probably would have wanted to throw out, my Google device. So for me, this news, would be devastating, knowing
Very
that
concerning.
right, I might have a device in my home, that's violating my privacy.
Yes, yes.
So the adoption of these kinds of technology, I would encourage users to learn as much as they can about them and to ensure that they are properly set up and to help protect, to protect us and to protect our personal data.
Yes, that is yeah. That definitely does make me think they are too smart and okay, maybe I have
You
to
know what? They're gonna get smarter. So we are just gonna have to get smarter about protecting ourselves as well.
fair enough, fair enough. So I have clearly have to do some more research here.
Yes.
So the other thing that I think about outside of these smart devices is how much of our lives we expose on social media. So people let you know when they aren't home, where they're traveling to,
Oh yes.
which is useful information for the old-fashioned thieves, but maybe also for the tech-savvy bandits.
Oh
So,
yes.
so in your view, do you think we expose too much of our information on social media as well?
Yeah, so based on, being on social media and, just observing, some persons utilizing these platforms, in many cases, they do post a lot of personal information there, which can be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of personal profiles, the Instagram and the Facebook profiles, for example, that are publicly accessible,
Yes,
you
yes.
know? So meaning anyone on the platform is able to see what you post on social media. And then we're now living in, what we call the selfie era. So
Yeah.
then what you
Yes.
find is person will take a selfie and, to post it on social media, tag their location.
Yes, yes.
This makes social media a good place for stalkers to just search and track your location if they
Mm-hmm.
want to, you know,
Yes.
or even for attackers who want to gather information to conduct maybe password guessing activities,
Yes. Like the name of
you
your
know?
dog or something like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So your pet's name, your husband's name, your children's names, your favorite hangout spot. A lot of times these favorite things, you know, get gets turned into a password
That's true. That's
or
true.
even used in your security questions for accessing your user accounts. So again, persons need to be really careful what they're posting on social media.
Yeah, and I mean, you talked about the selfies, but I think sometimes too, when people take selfies, sometimes they're not even aware what might be in the background that
Yes,
may give some more away than they intended.
yes.
Documents or some other. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because in the office area, sometimes you have persons with a habit of, putting a sticky note on their monitor, and then there's a big password posted on that sticky note, and then you're taking a selfie, and the monitor is in the background, and you're
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, I'm at work, and it's a good day." Yeah, that can be a tricky one.
Yes. Okay. Okay. But yeah, that is useful, and maybe people will think about that.
Yes.
So I mean, you talked about training in terms of one of the the ways that we could protect ourselves, especially in the corporate environment. You have to train your staff so that they know what are they understand the threat. But I
Yes.
was just wondering, do you think there's enough public education on data privacy, not just in the corporate setting, but even some of the things that we're talking about here now? Do you think we're doing enough to educate the public on how they can protect their data?
Yeah, well, I definitely think that we need to do a lot more to educate our public. It's very important that with the rapid advancement of technology,
Yes.
that, public education in whatever form, is made available to individuals to guide them on the do's and don'ts when it comes down to protecting their personal data, as well as for them to be educated on their rights as individuals
Mm-hmm.
regarding personal information being stored by entities, banks and so forth.
That's true.
Yeah, some businesses conduct user awareness and education sessions, for their staff that can help with this, but sometimes the content is, that they present is really geared towards, protecting company data rather than their own data across various mediums, that are not ones commonly used in the workplace. So I believe the various governments across the Caribbean region should, really work on developing public campaigns to educate our individuals on data privacy and security. A lot of our, the countries in the region, they are definitely looking towards, digitizing, the whole their data.
Yes.
And, data privacy and security would definitely be one that they need to focus on some more, both from uh, the public standpoint and even, just from the businesses and protecting their data and implementing all the necessary security in place.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So they definitely need to do more public education on cybersecurity or,
Yeah.
privacy, data privacy.
I agree because I guess we see ad campaigns that tell you about how to secure your home from, burglars or lock up your possessions, but I'm not really sure, as you mentioned, that there's enough on, the other type of threat.
Right.
Yeah. So I know we talked about data and the importance of protecting data. But what about the data we want to disappear? So I'm curious, like, can can data really be can data be erased? We talk about we put things out there, they're out there forever. So I'm just wondering.
So the answer is yes and no,
Mm-hmm.
right? So data stored locally, if it's in within the jurisdiction of the person who, it's their data,
Mm-hmm.
they can easily, erase that, But when data is uploaded to the internet, then that data can be stored in multiple places, like, your internet service provider, your own device, other person's devices, especially if it can be downloaded in some form. Persons are taking screenshots and they're copy and pasting and such,
Yes.
and probably posted in different locations, you know. In many cases where an individual enters data into a website, but they probably later want to attempt to delete it, then what is most likely to happen is that the data will no longer show on the website, but or be publicly available, but might still be stored in a database that somewhere that is not necessarily publicly
Mm-hmm.
accessible,
Okay.
right? So it's not available out there on the internet, but definitely still sitting somewhere else,
Yeah.
right? But
Mm.
some data can be truly erased if the medium on which it is stored, can be properly formatted, or the data is overwritten on the medium,
Okay.
or or it's physically destroyed. You take a hammer, you destroy
Yeah.
everything about it. you know
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah. The straighty hard drive kind of thing. Crap.
yeah, so some data can be removed, once it's in your control, but many times, data just stays out there and just on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, lastly, I guess I would like to ask, what would you say is maybe the most important thing individuals can do to protect their data? If they've heard nothing else we've talked about today, what should they take away in terms of protecting their data?
Okay, so the first thing I would want to say is keep your passwords private. Don't share your password with anybody, especially
Mm-hmm.
strangers.
Yes, I feel that's good advice.
Yes. You create strong passwords that are not easily guessed, not in a dictionary word, or you can use a combination of numbers and letters and symbols, to make it more complex or harder to guess,
Yes.
and definitely don't use passwords like password or password 123 or I love you or 12345. Those are not passwords. Please don't use them.
Fair
you
enough.
know. Also, do not use the same password to access all your accounts.
Mm-hmm.
You have your banking accounts, you may have your social media accounts. Don't use the same password. You know, we know it can be difficult to remember them sometimes, but
Yes, yes.
um that's why you normally have a forget password option. You'll be fine.
Okay,
you
okay.
know?
I was
So
gonna ask, yeah, about trying to remember. I was actually gonna ask you how do I remember all of these sophisticated passwords, but fair enough.
it can still be things that, you can remember. Preferably past phrases, So instead of using the word pineapple, you know, you can definitely use a phrase that's involved pineapple, something that you like about pineapple. And
Mm-hmm.
then in that phrase, you can change some of the letters to numbers, and
Mm,
you can use uppercase, lowercase, exclamation marks, just be
okay, okay,
creative.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Right. So, I mean, that was just on passwords. So, another thing is do not overshare on your social media sites. We discussed this in a
Mm-hmm.
bit earlier. Try not to post sensitive personal information like your full name, your tax number, your home address, your account numbers, on sites that are publicly accessible. I mean, it sounds weird that I'm saying this, but people people really do this.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's really, don't overshare on social media sites. And then, of course, avoid phishing emails. A lot of attacks do happen through, a user clicking a bad link. Don't open files, click on links, or download programs sent by strangers. that you're not expecting an email from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's also great practice to confirm with your senders, that you're familiar with, whether they themselves actually sent you
Sent
the
you
email.
something. Yeah.
Pick up the phone, call somebody, find out, and then you can, safely open the email in that case. Be careful when connecting to Wi-Fi in public places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
A
Yes.
secure Wi-Fi access, which requires a password to gain access, would usually be the best option. The open ones tend to be generally unsafe.
Okay.
So always look for the secure Wi-Fi options when you go into cafes and other public areas.
Yeah.
And finally, something that persons really don't enjoy doing, and I don't enjoy doing it either. Reading privacy statements or privacy policies.
Oh,
You know,
yeah. Well,
it's
okay.
long, it's tedious, it's nobody likes reading them.
Yeah,
But
we just click accept. Agreed.
right, yes, and move on with our lives. So read these privacy policies when as much as possible.
Okay, fair enough.
This is where website owners will tell you about site maintenance and the security of the site, as well as to tell you what type of personal information is being collected and how the information is being used.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you don't see or understand a site's privacy policy, then you probably might want to consider doing business elsewhere. But
Yes. Yes.
just always be careful. Try to read them as much as possible, and hopefully they're not the privacy policies that are like 20 pages thick.
Yes. Hopefully not.
Yeah. So those are some of the important things that you can do to protect your data.
Okay, so thank you so much, Karmena, for joining us today. Hopefully our listeners have learned a lot. I have to say, and that we will all take more steps and better approaches to protect our crown jewels. So thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks again, Athena, for giving me this opportunity to share.
Thanks. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to join us every other Wednesday for another episode of Shak. Subscribe to our podcast using your favorite podcast platform. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also connect with us on IG, Facebook, and Twitter, or by email at akilia@shakshak.club. Let's shake things up.